So hi everyone, my name is Victoria, and as you may have heard, I am the director of the symposium at Polygens. I'm very excited to introduce these three speakers to you, Jerry, Meghna, and Owen, who will be presenting talks today. Each presenter will have 10 minutes to present, and following each presentation, please write in the Q&A and we'll ask some questions of the presenters. So first up, we have Jerry. So Jerry, when you are ready, please feel free to share your screen and begin your presentation.
Okay, all right, amazing. Give me 1 second. Okay, can everyone see the presentation? All right, I think it should be good. Okay. When I mention cryptocurrencies and NFTs, what is the first thing that pops into your mind? Is it crypto bros who purchase Dogecoins just because it's funny? Is it perhaps Twitter users with a Bored Ape NFT as their profile picture just to show how rich they are? Take all of these assumptions today and throw it out the window. Bitcoin is no longer a vehicle for unlikely returns on investment. It is a technology that can alleviate poverty in developing countries. According to World Vision, 1.3 billion people spread across 107 developing countries live in multidimensional poverty. Multidimensional poverty encompasses an extensive set of domains such as poor health, lack of education, violence and disempowerment, and others. Though the reasons for poverty are obviously multifaceted, a primary poverty driver is economic factors. These factors include high inflation rates, fluctuation of exchange rates, absence of social trust, the prevalence of fraud, and lack of financial access. Accompanying its rise in popularity, cryptocurrencies were proposed as a novel solution to combat financial problems in developing countries. There are three distinct features of blockchain that allows it to address the issue at hand: decentralized, permissionless, and immutable. So just as a little bit of a context, cryptocurrency is a digital currency created using encryption technologies. One popular encryption technology implemented is blockchain technology. The important thing here to note is that A, cryptocurrency is a decentralized digital currency, meaning that no single governing body can control the blockchain network. B, cryptocurrencies and their transactions are immutable, which means that once minted, the coin cannot be altered by anybody, retaining a high degree of data integrity. And C, unlike traditional finances, cryptocurrencies are also permissionless, making it impossible to restrict someone's access to blockchain services. So what are the research goals for this project? Increasing awareness of the value of cryptocurrency will help stabilize it. Much of the volatility and one of the biggest downsides of cryptocurrency is that it is driven by skepticism and sensational trading. Increasing the awareness of the benefits of such currencies in the first world will increase the effectiveness of a crypto-backed financial system in the developing world. In addition, a recognition of the important role of blockchain technology in developing countries can inspire research and development initiatives. The research project right now is my effort to boost that awareness. So let's begin by getting into how cryptocurrency and blockchain can solve the aforementioned problems. A big problem in developing countries is fluctuating in inflation and exchange rates, which makes everybody poorer because the domestic currency is worth less. Cryptocurrencies are designed to be deflationary. According to the money supply theory, where money supply times the velocity of circulation is equal to the price level times the output, we can observe that the price level is directly proportional to the money supply. With a limited maximum supply like Bitcoin, Bitcoin can stabilize inflation. With low inflation, this means that the people's money are worth more and products are more affordable as well. Cryptocurrency's inflation-resistant nature allows it to weather recessions as well, considering that it was actually built on the heels of the 2008 financial housing crisis. Lastly, people can also choose to invest their money in Bitcoin as a safe haven to weather exchange rate fluctuations as well. Developing countries are also defiled by corruption, which leads to the absence of social trust. In Honduras, bureaucrats hacked government land databases to falsely re-register properties under their own names, which forcefully evicted low-income citizens. Due to the immutability of the digital ledger, cryptocurrencies deter rampant corruption in many developing countries. It is also impossible for Bitcoin to be duplicated or fraudulently manipulated because of its immutable nature, allowing for more transparency in the administrative process. With Bitcoin, we can build a blockchain-based land registration system for Honduras to protect farmers. So I know this is a humanities talk, but just as an extension to the project and like sort of this fun idea, I used Solidity, the programming language for blockchain, to build a smart contract as a prototype for the blockchain land registration system. The important thing here is that the results of my project prove that blockchain can be used to deter corruption. Another huge issue is that traditional financial services also gatekeep low-income communities from utilizing them with high fees. The British Department of International Development found that more than 2.5 billion people have no access to a financial institution or an insurance provider. Principally, blockchain permits people to access financial services and instruments for free as a result of its permissionless characteristics. You only need two things to trade Bitcoin: the internet and a Bitcoin wallet. Bitcoin can help marginalized individuals escape poverty in developing nations by giving them financial freedom. So the last thing that I want to talk about is how Bitcoin also bridged the gap between international communities. Where traditional platforms like Western Union mandate a very expensive fee transferring money across borders, peer-to-peer cryptocurrency networks have meager fees. The low barrier of fees incentivizes trading across the globe. This connection between the developed and developing world promotes internationalism, which enables an exchange of technology and information. We can also potentially see a new wave of investment towards cryptocurrency firms and projects in developing countries because of the new lucrative, expansive potential of cryptocurrencies. Foreign direct investment can promote competition, employment, and information exchange as well. So let's now talk about El Salvador. On September 7, 2021, Bukele, El Salvador's president, codified Bitcoin as legal tender through the Bitcoin law. Unfortunately, as of June 2022, the nationwide Bitcoin experiment is floundering. Since the time Bukele announced the Bitcoin law, Bitcoin has depreciated by 55% in value, resulting in a net loss for the country's investment. Besides the loss in value, Bitcoins are also not widely adopted by households in El Salvador. A working paper from the National Bureau of Economic Research found that less than 60% of El Salvador citizens downloaded the Bitcoin wallet, and 20% continued to use the app after spending their $30 sign-up bonus. However, there are a few circumstantial factors that we need to consider. The El Salvador government only has a $50 million unrealized paper loss on Bitcoin, which is less than 0.5% of the national budget. Furthermore, innovations historically struggle for adoption during their initial release. Bitcoin is a novel technology. It's brand new. It hasn't been along for too long. So we need to wait for the Bitcoin City project, the largest Bitcoin initiative in El Salvador aimed at increasing tourism and mining, to finish construction. Therefore, the impact of recognizing Bitcoin and the case study so far is not yet definitive. One of the leading arguments against cryptocurrencies made by skeptics and the IMF is its volatile nature. According to the Harvard Business Review from April to June, Bitcoin's value has depreciated more than half, from just over $45,000 to around $20,000. In the context of developing countries, this could result in a crippling financial loss for them, like we saw in El Salvador. However, as mainstream adoption of cryptocurrency becomes more common, and as more developing countries inject cryptocurrency into their economy, this volatility will actually level out. When individuals recognize that cryptocurrencies and blockchain technologies can help millions of people around the world, they will stop treating it as a vehicle for unlikely returns on investments, which will also help stabilize the price. The internet kickstarted the digital revolution, where information and communication was digitalized. Cryptocurrency is the next big step in the digital revolution, as it digitizes currency. Proper implementation of cryptocurrencies and blockchain technologies can alleviate poverty in developing countries by promoting financial inclusion, hedging against inflation, and bridging the gap between developed and developing countries. So let us lead the future of developing countries and the next big step in the digital revolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. That presentation was very enlightening. I have a question, but I know we have some audience members here. So if anyone in the audience has a question for Jerry, please leave some in the Q&A. But my question is really around Bitcoin and other forms of cryptocurrency. And so as you kind of laid out the future of Bitcoin, I'm wondering how that relates to other crypto tokens or what that means for their future.
Okay, yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, so far, most of the studies are examining Bitcoin as it is one of the largest and most popular forms of cryptocurrencies, right? But in other cases, we've also seen popularity with other coins such as Ethereum or other cryptocurrencies beginning to gain stability as well. So for example, with Ethereum, we've had Solidity, which is actually the programming language that I use to like build different types of blockchain technology projects. And the thing is, once Bitcoin, a singular type of cryptocurrency, becomes more prominent, and again, once its volatility like levels out, we think we can see a similar trend in other types of Bitcoin as well, because they're again bundled towards the blockchain technology. Just as like a fun addition, like here's my prediction. I think that in the future, there's going to be less and less different types of cryptocurrency. I think cryptocurrencies are more going to like just focus around some of the biggest ones, right? Instead of this like sensational trading, oh, I'm going to throw my money in Bitcoin and I hope it goes to the moon. It's going to be more focused around the ones that are really stable and really developed.
Fascinating. Thank you. I was also wondering what the most difficult or where you encountered bumps in the road in your project were. What was that like with your project?
Yeah, so the biggest difficulty was, it was my first time working with data, and I got it was hard to find data for the first place for El Salvador. And really doing the case study, sort of like figuring what all the data meant, using some statistical measures to sort of find trends and patterns within data. That was one of the hardest challenges because it was something that I really never touched on before. Yeah, I would say that's like probably the biggest challenge for me.
Great. And did your mentor kind of step in and help you fill that
Yeah,
gap?
definitely. Yeah, guided me a little bit. Told me, hey, maybe. And the other thing was like even like it wasn't just like data, like statistical analysis methods, which I've never seen that he helped me guide on. But also the other thing was like sometimes I just don't know like, oh, what like an economic concept applies to, or I'm looking for the relationship between cryptocurrencies and some sort of economic concept. And sort of you can guide me in a direction, say, maybe research a little bit into this topic, maybe research a little bit into monetarism or stuff like that. And then, that's really helped me guide my research project a little bit.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much, Jerry. I'm going to pass it off now to Meghna for her presentation. So let me spotlight you, and whenever you are ready, feel free to share your screen and get started.
It'll just take a moment. Hi, my name is Meghna, and I research digital marketing in the makeup industry, and specifically the impacts of attraction and retention of Generation Z. So just as an overview, the research conducted investigated the changing nature of marketing, specifically in the makeup industry. I chose to focus on Generation Z due to the impact of its consistently growing purchasing power in the digital era today. So in my presentation, I covered attraction tactics, retention tactics, and a case study featuring Glossier. So here are some major attraction tactics employed by the makeup industry that I found to be successful. First of all, being social media. Due to the amount of time younger consumers spend on social media, the beauty industry can employ persuasive tactics, which has an impact on the behaviors of this generation. Second of all would be beauty influencers. So nowadays, 50% of consumers rely on recommendations made by influencers when purchasing beauty products. They have a huge influence. And the partnerships that beauty brands use with these influencers are an important way of promoting the brand and their products, which have a positive impact on consumers based on how they're viewed by the general population. The third way would be storytelling. So storytelling illustrates the brands and its values, creating emotional connections by consumers based on what they view online. And I found that Generation Z looks for authenticity in a brand's principles, and storytelling can really bring that meaningful consumer brand relationship to life. Moving on to the second step would be retaining the customers after attracting them, so retention tactics. First of all, it would be brand communities. So consumers can use the given platform to produce and share content, ideas, and connect with others. And brands can use these communities to their advantage by differentiating their customers with just them being sale numbers, and it resonates well with Generation Z's values of community, connection, and uniqueness. Customer satisfaction is also a crucial component of customer retention, which has an impact on sales and long-lasting relationships with customers. So makeup brands prioritize and do not overlook satisfaction levels of customers, as it's been found that its impacts on customer retention work in favor of the brand and its existing reputation. Third of all would be loyalty programs. So nowadays, digital outlets are the powerhouse for Generation Z, which is what makes it so important. And this means that digital consumer loyalty programs are a beneficial tool for consumer engagement and loyalty with makeup brands. So a real-life example of a digitally native beauty brand that employs attraction and retention tactics to gain younger consumers like Generation Z would be Glossier. So in my case study, I made it a point to research their You Look Good campaign, which emphasizes being authentic and staying natural. And one of the main things that made this campaign really stand out was her celebrity partnership with Olivia Rodrigo. So it was a huge success since she resonates well with Generation Z, and her presence in the campaign allowed Glossier to promote themselves and their products toward the younger consumers, which is an example of a beauty influencer partnership. And another major tactic that Glossier uses to attract customers is their use of social media, since that's what they primarily utilize to market themselves. And they have 4 major goals. First goal is a consumer-first beauty approach, where they always put whatever the consumer wants and their needs before they develop products to meet those. Second would be using creative content and really showcasing that through their usage of social media. And that also connects to the third goal, which is building a large social media presence. That is where they do most of their advertising. That is where they're mainly known for. And the fourth one would be creating personal connections with consumers. So they really look for their input and connect with them through blogs and what they post on social media. So to sum up all the major points, there are a variety of tactics used to attract and retain Generation Z. The 3 main attraction tactics would be beauty partnerships with influencers, storytelling, and social media. Second step would be retention, brand communities, customer satisfaction, and loyalty programs. And attraction and retention tactics work together because attraction is the first step to accumulate an audience, and retention is the second step to actually keep them going. And once they develop that bond with the consumer, it allows the brand to thrive in the market, which is really competitive, and have them stand out from competition. And utilizing these connections that brands can develop with the consumers in the makeup industry really helps them keep the relationship going. And the growth of purchasing power of Generation Z makes them a prime target for brands to reach out to in this digital era, since they are the next generation that is going to continue to be a target for these brands. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Meghna. That was such a great conversation and presentation. As a Glossier consumer myself, I'm very interested in what you had to say. So I have a couple questions for you about what you presented. The first being, Glossier is a fantastic case study of appealing to Gen Z, but are there other beauty brands, whether it be makeup or skincare, that really follow this pattern as well, or is Glossier really leading the pack?
I feel like there are a lot of brands that are involved in skincare and makeup that are catching on to this new trend of Generation Z and are really trying to appeal to them. But I felt like Glossier really stood out because it's the first thing that really came to mind. And after I did some more research, I really figured out that a lot of the tactics I researched for my paper were also the same ones that they use. So that's why I felt like it was kind of in the lead. But I definitely feel like there are others that do follow the same.
Great. And I had another question for you about customer life cycle. So of course, you know, there are so many makeup brands and beauty brands out there in the world, and people like to try new things. And so in your opinion, when does that cycle kind of end where you try the exciting thing, you realize it's good, but then something else comes out? When does that customer loyalty start to fall off?
I definitely feel like that is a big concern for loyalty because if you have something going with a brand and you really like their products and then you see something better come along, I definitely think that that would be an issue. So I think that's where the cycle may fall off. But if you really focus on like the brand and the consumer, just them two in a relationship with the products, I think that the cycle can definitely continue going on, but it's definitely possible for it to fall off since it's not a complete science.
Thank you. And my final question for you is, do you see this cycle expanding to other industries like fashion or, you know, others that may or may not mirror what you're seeing in beauty?
Yes, I definitely feel like the tactics I research are definitely used throughout all industries, but I really wanted to highlight them specifically in the makeup industry and really show their effects on how they work there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your presentation again. I am going to pass it over to Owen for our final presentation of the session. So let me spotlight you, Owen, and whenever you're ready, feel free to share your screen and begin.
Thank you very much. Let me set up here. All right. So hi everyone, my name's Owen Wu. My presentation is going to be on political leaders and polarization. It is remarkably clear that our government and people have grown increasingly divisive due to polarization, which is the parties moving to the polls. My presentation will examine the myths and truths of polarization, as well as examine the ambiguous role the leaders play. To truly understand the political crisis the nation is about to face, let's put polarization into perspective. Professor James Lowe of USC states that levels of polarization has been as high as that of during the Civil War. In that level, the nation risked collapse. Today, a survey done by political scientist Peter Levine finds that 81% of Republicans and Democrats felt unfavorable to each other. And compare these numbers to 1994, we will find that polarization increased by 64%. Evaluating the mutual feelings between different party members is known as affective polarization, one of the two types of polarization I will be examining today. On the next slide, I will show you a chart detailing affective polarization in the span of 30 years. Here we can see that in around 1980, the Republicans and Democrats' view on each other, their favorableness, were relatively high with 45 points. However, as the years went on, compare this to 2005, that has almost decreased 20 points, meaning that Republicans and Democrats, they increasingly grew unfavorable to each other. In a 2020 study done by Peter Levine, 92% of Republicans seem to lean right of the median Democrat, while 94% of Democrats lean left of the median Republican. This type of polarization is known as ideological polarization, where the increasing extremity of the ideology from each party is measured. For example, a comparison of ideology would be seeing how parties have diverged from the median voter. On the next slide, we can visualize ideological gaps growing. Here we can see that in 1994, there was a relatively high amount of centrist opinions shown here in purple, and the median Democrat and the median Republican were relatively centrist. However, compare this with 2014, we find that the centrist opinions have consistently decreased, while the median Democrat and Republican have moved further away towards the polls. Here we can also see that the polls where the extreme opinions lie, those have grown as well. So what are the consequences of this polarization trend? The legislature could be in political gridlock, which prevents legislation and laws from being passed. Furthermore, the government risks shutdown and the demands and needs of the citizens go unheard. During the late 1950s, nearly 1,000 bills were passed by both the House and the Senate, while compared to 2013, less than 300 bills were successfully passed. Political scientists have offered a number of explanations for these trends, and the conventional wisdom is as follows: political activism, election policies, in-group biases, and media bubbles. The activist story details how those involved in politics, generally more extreme than the public, than the median voter, tend to push the party to the polls simply because the candidates produced in primaries would match that of the ideology of activists. With election policies, the need to win party primaries, along with gerrymandering, seem to account for pushing political parties to the polls. As for in-group biases, it is expected that people of one party generally conform to their own views, intolerable of opposition. Finally, in media bubbles, algorithms in social media could expose people to hyper-partisan content, which influencing their beliefs. Despite the convincing arguments, however, these explanations seem to leave out a critical factor of the phenomenon: influential political leaders. Moreover, the conventional wisdom does not address the power political leaders possess. With political activists, it is generally believed that activists who are more politically engaged than the average voter will push candidates to more extreme polls. However, if this theory was correct, we would expect to see the polarization of the general public match that of activists. Furthermore, we would also expect to see activist polarizations happen before that of the public, simply because activists tend to be more involved in politics. However, it seems that activist polarization across all issues has grown with the exception of gay rights, where there has been a noticeable depolarization in party preferences. This means that there are more and more disagreements on policy issues, some on a basic level, such as on climate or elections. Interestingly, the issue that has seen a reduction in polarization is gay rights. This study done by Collett and Heighton shows that activists are in fact responsible for polarizing the majority of issues between parties, demonstrating their ability to drive ideological polarization. Furthermore, Collett and Heighton in the same study make clear that activists don't respond to the same force as powerful party elite members do, which would result in stronger influence on elected officials. With all evidence put in consideration, activists clearly have the ability to influence ideological polarization simply because individual contributions mean more to officials. Thus, politicians would want to appeal to voters as parties rely more on activists and people donating rather than massive sums from corporations. Once again, for election policies typically refer to party primaries where candidates run against members of their own party, and as well as gerrymandering, which is a tactic used by political parties to redraw district lines to favor one party over the other. So once again, let's assume that election policies indeed do drive polarization. If this was true, we would expect to see the majority of elected officials to be extremists, as mainly extremists win primaries and then advance to general elections. Furthermore, we would see that the public influences the elections much more than elites, as in primaries, candidates conform to the ideals of activists, generally more extreme than those of the party elites. However, in an analysis of the Senate done by political scientist Nolan McCarty, it makes clear that there is only a small number of extreme minority party legislators posed against a larger number of moderate party legislators, meaning that extremists who are expected to win these elections pose little to no threat to moderate candidates. Furthermore, in his analysis, he finds that the introduction of a primary in the Senate has no correlation to increased polarization, disproving the relevance of primaries in polarization. However, other bodies are not addressed, such as the House of Representatives or state legislatures. Finally, he finds that the amount of diversity in a district directly relates to polarization, which goes against the effect of gerrymandering. Gerrymandered districts would tend to have similar people of similar political affiliation. However, if diverse districts with lots of moderates are just as susceptible to electing extremists as partisan districts, then gerrymandering has no effect. Despite common beliefs that primaries and gerrymandering push polarization among elected officials, both seem to have little effect on affective and ideological polarization. Furthermore, we go into in-group biases, which is the psychological element of voters, where people tend to develop an us and them dynamic, favoring people inside the groups while developing negative feeling towards those on other groups. In the American two-party system, it is very likely that members develop positive feelings towards members in their own group, while developing negative feelings towards those outside of the party. With biases, we would expect to see party interests prioritized over national interests, since a member's loyalty would likely go first before the nation's interests as a whole. Furthermore, we would likely see strong parties forming, resulting in a reduction of moderate voters. In a study done by political scientist Julie Ronsky, it is clear that individuals are blind to themselves, cherry-picking their own facts to justify their morals, while they call out opponents for forming preferences based on emotion and not fact. The hypocrisy of loyal party voters is a clear driver of affective polarization, as the inability to reason logically and reason with other parties promote the villainization of opponents, causing affective polarization. Finally, we would examine media bubbles, and which is where different media platforms such as YouTube and Instagram would have algorithms that promote extreme content. A great part of in-group favoritism would be developed by the rise in social media platforms such as TikTok, YouTube. If this theory was true, we would expect to see the majority of the polarized public only consume media that fits their beliefs, as algorithms would continuously push off content catered to one person's specific interests. However, according to political scientists Gentkow and Shapiro's study, a user's omnivoreness in media consumption outweighs their ideological extremity, preventing their overall news diet from becoming too skewed. This would mean that, contrary to popular belief, people generally consume information from a more diverse source. In the same study, these scientists found that people who visited the Huffington Post also visited Fox News, meaning that different political messages could potentially neutralize extreme messages that may be promoted from one source. Now, what do leaders have to do with the rise in polarization? To answer that question, let's define what an influential political leader is, which is someone who is extremely popular within their party and their opinion holds weight in the public. I'm talking about Ron DeSantis, AOC, and President Trump. All four pieces of the conventional wisdom are convincing, but there are still gaps left. There could be a fifth possible explanation to what causes polarization: influential political leaders. In the nation right now, there are many relatively moderate districts who somehow elect extremists during the elections. One election cycle, an extremist candidate from one party may lose to an extremist from the other party. This phenomenon is unexplained by basic election policies alone. Leaders such as Donald Trump drive polarization by using rhetoric that promotes in-group favoritism, causing their supporters to feel anger towards the other party. It is unique that it is in the age of media, leaders are able to find an audience group and connect with voters directly, meaning their influence can be greater. This would explain activist polarization. For ideological polarization, however, it is likely leaders are a product of it. Political activism likely promotes extreme candidates, widening the ideological gap. Consequently, leaders would have to conform. Ultimately, political leaders play a critical role in driving the wedge between Americans. The relationship of activists driving extreme leaders and leaders driving activists would indeed reinforce the increase in polarization, ideological and affective. Thank you for listening to my presentation.
Thank you so much, Owen. That was so eye-opening. We have a couple of questions for you. The first being, what was the most shocking piece of information that you learned when doing your research?
So during my research, I think probably what struck me the most was the election policies parts, because growing up in a pretty partisan district, I live in Massachusetts, which is leaning very Democrat. I always think that because there are so many people with similar political opinions, and we're not exposed to opinions of other members of a different party, it's likely that we may have stronger feelings towards members of our own party. But it turns out districts even with many people of the same political affiliation, there's still relatively moderate candidates, which was pretty shocking.
Definitely. Another question for you is, what advice would you give to a student who is embarking on a research project on this topic?
I think what is so most important is to check your sources and not be too easily swayed by one opinion. Obviously, we see in news stories, a lot of them are very one-sided, and it's important to consider that these different news stories are intended to captivate it's trying to push certain feelings with these narratives. And it's important to consider that until we know the issue or policy at a whole view, we have to evaluate it holistically. We can't make decisions based on one side.
Great advice. It's always important to check your sources and hear what other people think. Another question from you, from Lily, is, as high school students that are soon able to vote, how do you think we can prevent ourselves from being susceptible to in-group bias and ideological polarization so that we can be open-minded towards both sides?
Well, I think the simple answer is to always try to do your best to put yourself in the other person's shoes. Right now, I think that idea of seeing, say, if you're a Democrat, you see a Republican, you would likely bring up very negative stereotypes about who these people are. Or if you're a Republican, you may try to label more progressive individuals as socialists. It's important to know that and try to visualize, no matter who people are or where they belong in a political party, that they're all Americans, and we need to try to reason with them and find common interests in order to work towards solutions that can benefit us all. Because many issues Democrats and Republicans, they want to reach the same goal. For inflation, we see both Democrats and Republicans. It's clear that both want to reduce inflation, but both have different methods to do so.
Very, very good advice for anyone who is thinking about the next time they enter the polls. So thank you so much, Owen. I want to return. There was a late question added for Meghna, and so I just want to make sure that that gets answered. So Meghna, as far as digital marketing goes in the makeup industry, which platform, in your opinion, has the potential to attract and retain your generation most effectively?
So I think this would be really based upon social media. And I think three different kinds of social media that are mainly utilized would be TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. And I think that all of them have their own like benefits, and that'd be like more research into deciding which one would be the best one. But I would say Instagram because I feel like that's a lot where campaigns and everything goes.
That's so interesting, especially because it seems like TikTok is really taking over. So that's a great insight. Well, thank you all three of you so very much. We're going to wrap up a few minutes early so that maybe you can catch the tail end of our college panel, which is happening now. But I greatly appreciate all three of you. Your research was wonderful and your presentations were great. And I hope that you enjoyed this experience. And we will talk to you later. Bye.